When a startup begins its business, establishing a legal entity holds significant meaning in various aspects. Unlike a sole proprietorship, a legal entity allows for the separation of business funds and personal assets, which helps reduce financial risk. Furthermore, it offers many advantages in attracting external investment or applying for government support programs, especially the joint stock company. Jusik Hoesa structure is suitable for startups with high growth potential, as it facilitates capital raising through stock issuance. The process of establishing a legal entity goes through several stages. It involves first carefully deciding on the basic matters of the business, then preparing the necessary documents, applying for legal entity registration at the competent registry office, and finally completing the business registration at the tax office. The very first step is to decide on the basic matters required for establishing the legal entity. When determining the company name, you must check if the desired name is already in use in the same jurisdiction. You also need to define the specific business purposes, outlining what kind of business you will conduct. These business purposes will be listed on the Certificate of Incorporation and serve as the basis for determining the industry code when registering the business later. For startups, it is advisable to specify around 10 business purposes clearly. Additionally, you must decide on the location of the legal entity's head office. It is important to consider the cost aspect, as registration tax and education tax can be tripled if the address is located in a population concentration control area. You also need to decide on the initial capital amount required to start the business. Although there is no longer a minimum capital requirement, experts recommend setting the capital at least at Kr. 1 million or more for startups. The capital amount also affects the establishment costs. Finally, you must determine the composition of shareholders and executives, who will be shareholders holding equity, and who will serve as directors or auditors managing the company. You also need to decide on matters related to stock issuance, such as the total number of shares to be issued and the par value per share. Based on these decided matters, you will prepare various documents required for legal entity registration. These include the Articles of Incorporation, which contain the fundamental rules about the company's organization and activities, and the minutes of the founders' meeting or general meeting of shareholders, which record decisions such as establishing the legal entity and approving the Articles of Incorporation. If you have 3 or more directors, you also need to prepare the minutes of the board of directors meeting, recording matters like the appointment of the representative director, the stock subscription agreement, where the founders, those who subscribe to shares at the time of establishment, agree to subscribe to shares, and the capital payment certificate, which proves that the decided capital has actually been deposited into a bank account in the company's name, are also essential documents. Furthermore, you will need the seal certificates and resident registration copies, or abstracts of each shareholder and executive to prove their identity, as well as the corporate seal and the personal seals of the executives. Once all necessary documents are prepared, you apply for legal entity registration at the competent registry office. There are generally 2 ways to apply for registration: electronic registration and paper registration. Electronic registration is done online. You can use a joint certificate or financial certificate for electronic signatures, eliminating the need to submit physical copies of seal certificates or resident registration copies. It is also typically faster than paper registration, averaging about 7 business days. Paper registration involves visiting the registry office in person or submitting documents by mail. This method may take a little longer than electronic registration, averaging about 7 to 10 business days. When applying for legal entity registration, you will incur public charges such as registration tax, education tax, and court fees, as well as agency fees. If you entrust the process to a legal professional like a judicial scrivener or lawyer, these costs vary depending on the capital amount and the location of the head office, whether it is in a population concentration control area. Once the legal entity registration is completed, you must register as a business operator to be able to conduct business. You can apply for business registration by visiting the competent tax office or using the home tax website. Only after completing this business registration can you officially start your business. The process of establishing a startup legal entity can feel somewhat complex and require attention to many details, especially if it's your first time. Even a small mistake can cause problems later on. Therefore, many startups choose to proceed with the help of experts, such as judicial scriveners or lawyers. Working with experts can help ensure the process is conducted accurately and can save time and costs. It is good to remember that startups are generally established as joint stock companies. It is recommended to set the capital at least at Kr. 1 million or more, and it is advisable to specify around 10 business purposes clearly. Establishing a legal entity is a crucial step in building a stable foundation for your business. So please research thoroughly and proceed carefully.